Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you that are hearing us from the Americas. Good afternoon to all of you that are hearing me from Europe. I'm also speaking to you from Europe right now in the Netherlands. Welcome to the webinar of today. My name is Marcel Langone. I'm project manager within Solarplaza. Today we have Hector Olea, president of ASOLMEX and CEO of Gauss Energia, and Alejo Lopez, senior sales director of Mexico and Latin America for NEXTracker. And our webinar for today is first learnings on the Mexican O&M marketplace, planning for efficient long-term operations. So a brief agenda for today. First, a brief introduction on the webinar and on our upcoming conference in Mexico. Just after, we will discuss why design matters for O&M, so why O&M and operations need to be conceived and think of thoroughly in the development stage, then commissioning, how to start operations with the right food, risk management, so what are the common operational risks and mitigating strategies, and then one of these big risks, and is something that it's very important to consider in the region, is how to deal with unpredictable severe weather conditions. So for that, again, we will have Hector Olea and Alejo Lopez with me. Afterwards, we will do Q&A. Feel free at any moment to ask any questions. I will go over through the instructions just in a second, and we will end our webinar in about 1 hour. So for those of you that don't know us that well, Solarplaza is a high-level B2B conference organizer and also a content platform. We were established in 2004, and we have organized more than 100 events worldwide in over 30 countries, and we have a network of 60,000 PV professionals and growing every day. So this webinar is also a pre-call to our Solar Asset Management Mexico and Central America conference. It will be held from 8 to 10 October in Mexico City, and it's the first conference that combines the development, the finance, and the optimal operation of solar plants and portfolios. So we're looking at the whole life cycle. We're expecting over 200 attendees, over 4 leading experts that will share their experience and their vision on stage, Hector and Alejo included, and over 15 sponsors and exhibitors at the show. So first of all, a great thank you note for all our conference sponsors that make the conferences and our content possible. Thank you. And a selection of attendees that you can see now in screen that will be with us in October at the conference. So don't miss the chance to meet these professionals in Mexico in October. Our very early bird is expiring on Friday, 20 July. So if you have made your decision, please don't wait longer for that. Our special tariff ends this Friday. Some practical notes just before we start. If you are experiencing any technical issues, please use the chat box. If you have also questions for us, for the panelists, use the question chat box also on your right. And don't worry, the presentation slides will be available afterwards, and the recordings as well. So our first speaker of today that I would like to introduce is Hector Olea. He's president of ASOLMEX. He has more than 23 years of experience in the Mexican energy sector, and he's an active renewable energy promoter. Since 2004, he's president and CEO of Gauss, a local development firm, and he has acted before as CEO of SUEZ in Mexico and chairman of the Mexican Energy Regulatory Commission. So before we start with our discussion, we will hear an introduction from Hector and then an introduction from Alejo. And Hector, I'm unmuting you right now and giving you the control, and the stage is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Marcel. Thank you very much for organizing this very timely conference on O&M and asset management. I think is again very timely for the Mexican market. Just reminded that right now we are calculating that by the end of this year, 30 projects, utility scale projects, will be in operation by the end of this year, and we expect that onwards in the next 10 years, Mexico will have new projects for about 60 new projects enter into operation in the following 10 years. So it's a very active market, Mexico, right now. And I think this type of focus conference on O&M and asset management are very timely for this market. Let me briefly run through Gauss as an introduction. Go ahead with it. I think I can control this. If you can move on the.
Yep, perfect.
Yeah, another one. This an overview. You can read it later. Okay. Gauss is as Marcel mentioned in the introduction, is a business development firm that we specialize in the energy sector, more particular in the PV solar development process. Our main competitive advantage, I would say, is the innovation. We have been in the front form of the innovation in the Mexican market. We were the first utility scale facility that entered into operation in 2013. We're going to talk a little about that later on. We're focusing in the next generation of energy projects in solar. We will talk a little bit about storage and the projects we're doing on the storage front. We have been very active in promoting renewable energy in Mexico since 2004, actually, when Gauss was created. We have a great deal of experience in putting together projects, not only as a development, but also in the structuring of those projects, in the project management, and in the asset management. We can go into the next slide. Another one. Here are our core competences. As I mentioned, we're active in the whole value chain in the development process. As I mentioned, we act as developers, originators, and developers of projects. We go into the very specific of identifying the business opportunity, originate that business opportunity, develop the project, and move into the execution as a project manager. And we stayed in the asset management phase. So we're in the whole value chain. The only thing we don't do, we always contract, is the O&M services as an external contractor. Going into the projects we're operated right now, Aura Solar Uno is a 39 megawatt peak facility in La Paz. As I mentioned, was the first utility scale project in Mexico that entered into operation in September 2013. It's a pequeña producción type of project, so we sell all the power to CFE under a 20-year PPA. As I mentioned, is located nearby the airport of La Paz, Baja California Sur in Mexico. We act as a developer, as a project management, and currently we are the asset manager of this project. Aura Solar 2 is also, we developed this project. It's a 62 megawatt peak facility in Honduras, in Choluteca, Honduras. So we operate on a 20-year PPA, selling power to the national utility, the NE. We entered into commercial operation in July 2015, and again, we act as a developer, project manager, and asset manager. Finally, we're in the midst of finishing our third utility scale project, Aura Solar 3, which is a 32 megawatt facility under a pequeña producción regime, es a legado project under pequeña producción. We sell the whole power to CFE under a 20-year PPA. A particularity of this project is that it's going to be the first project in Mexico that is going to include a storage and a storage solution, a large-scale solar solution, a 10 megawatt peak solution with 5.5 megawatt hour of energy, and that is going to interact with the PV facility. So we have here in Mexico the first PV and storage facility entering into operation next month, August 2018. Also is located in La Paz, Baja California Sur, and we act as a developer, project manager, and asset manager. That would be all for this introduction, Marcel.
Thank you very much, Hector, for the introduction. Please stay on the line. We will come back, of course, for the questions. Now, I would like to introduce the second speaker, the panelist of today, Alejo Lopez. He's Senior Sales Director, Mexican Latin American. For NEXTracker, he's a subject matter expert in Latin American energy markets and has over a decade of experience. He's responsible for building the NEXTracker market share in Mexico. This is above 1 gigawatt. Prior to that, Alejo was country manager for Hangwa Q Cells, and he currently sits on the board of ASOLMEX. Alejo, we are about to unmuting you, and we're preparing your presentation as well. So please be prepared. Okay, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Marcel. Well, thank you, Solarplaza, also for the opportunity to participate in this webinar. I'm very excited to share this discussion with Hector. He's a pioneer in the solar industry in Mexico, for those that don't know him. And also, as you can see from his presentation, one of the most experienced developers and investors in the industry. So very, very excited. And we have a very exciting conversation coming up. So I'm gonna make my introduction brief. So NEXTracker, for those that are not familiar with it, we're the leading provider of single access tracker globally with 13 gigawatts delivered worldwide. We have a 33% global market share in 2017, according to Green Tech Media latest tracker report, and we're first for 3 years in a row. You know, fairly young but growing and very well established leading company in the world. We have about 2.5 gigawatts in Mexico, out of which well over 1.5 gigawatts are completing construction. And about 4 gigawatts in the Latin American region, including Brazil, Chile, and our key markets. So we're part of, since 2015, we're part of Flex. Flex is a major and well-established investment-grade electronics manufacturer. So it serves as a great platform for NEXTracker to you know, support us with our global supply strategy and all the bankability required for the size of projects that we are engaging nowadays. So you know, one of the you know, major themes at NEXTracker is innovation. So as we'll see in a moment, that's you know, reflected in our product and our technology, and also you know, we're also engaging the storage market, etc. So you know, just to, I think I agree with Hector that this is a great time to have a discussion on O&M, and Mexico is going to have probably about 2.5 gigawatts of projects operational by the end of this year, and I think that's very significant. Consider that we've moved almost from 0 to this amount. So O&M, I think we haven't had really a good discussion on O&M yet. Everybody's been, focused on development, getting projects off the ground, financing, and now construction. And I think O&M is definitely a critical piece that not a lot of folks have really spent time thinking about. And product design and including tracker design is critical to address long-term project profitability and O&M risks and cost. I mean, we see a lot of focus on price and on cost, and rightly so. The PPAs are extremely competitive, and you need to make your capex work. But we see often that folks overlook the long-term overall levelized cost, for the dollars per watt or the cents per watt, and I think there's direct implications from one to the other. So, as you can see, NEXTracker, addresses, O&M already in our product design. It's been adopted since we started, and the critical components of this is, we started with a Pioneer with independent road tracker. So that design is 100% to address the easiness and the cost effectiveness of cleaning and vegetation management mostly. So we have self-power tracker as well. So our technology doesn't require outside wiring, and also provides an excellent platform for faster, better O&M. Another element that we do include in our tracker design that addresses long-term O&M cost is the use of fasteners and not nuts and bolts, so you don't need retorquing over long term, as well as and this is something that probably gets overlooked quite often, is wind design. I mean, we are pioneers in using wind tunnel testing for wind design and not relying only on local code to design our projects. And we can discuss that later, but we've seen, I think, on the internet recently, a lot of videos of trackers having issues under wind conditions. And fortunately, there's some of NEXTracker also performing under high wind conditions without a problem, and that is not a chance. We're not lucky. We really spend a lot of time and include risk mitigation components in our tracker to address wind risk. So we'll talk a lot more about that during the discussion. And also, I mean, we're thinking about software as well as hardware, how to provide a smart platform that we can, gather all this data, but also create analytics. I mean, give you back intelligence that you can use as an asset manager to, maximize your uptime, turn most of your corrective O&M into predictive O&M, and we can do that not only with our product design, but also with our spare part strategy and where O&M, digital O&M services. And finally, I mean, the end game is increased profitability of this project. So we've launched a machine learning software which is proven. We have several 100 megawatts of tested projects. It's been launched about a year ago. It's called THRU Capture, and it's a software that basically addresses row-to-row shading and diffuse light condition, and is it's allows plant operators to increase the yield by 2 to 6% depending on project location. So we've looked at the whole life cycle of project profitability and risk, and I'm really excited to move on into the discussion and talk about each one of these in more detail.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the introduction, Alejo. So indeed, it seems that 2018 will be a key year for the market. So you were talking just about 2.5 gigawatts installed. What are the short-term the medium-term projections? I have heard several times and read several times that Mexico is really going to be top 10 of PV install in the world. When will that happen?
But I mean, I have no doubts that Mexico will be. I think it was already in the top 10 and is gonna get there. I think right now, in my opinion, what I'm seeing is a lot of projects are, having the normal struggles to move from development through construction. Even though there's a lot of experienced developers, I mean, Gauss, one of them, but, we have some of the major players also, involved in this market. The human capital is fairly new in most cases. So, everybody has a learning curve. So we're seeing that the banks, are getting familiar with this technology. The independent engineers here in Mexico are getting, so it's been a little bit, painful to get some of those projects moving. That is happening now, and there's normal. And I think once that learning curve is done, and I think, we can say that by the end of the year, it's going to be done. I mean, there should be, a loop closing between all this information going back to developers in terms of, what are real construction costs, what are real, equipment costs, and, what are the real, power prices. And I'm not saying that those real power prices are going to be necessarily higher than what we have today, but there's going to be a readjustment there. But I do think that the industry is going to continue to be extremely competitive, and therefore driving a lot more bilateral PPAs. I mean, the auctions are going to continue to be an excellent vehicle for these projects to get offtake agreements. So, I mean, there's about almost 6 gigawatts of solar projects contracted already in the first 3 auctions. We can expect 1.5 to 2 more gigawatts in the next auction at the end of the year. And I think we're seeing a lot of an uptake of bilateral projects. I mean, Hector can tell you more about some niches that he's looking at that probably most people are not thinking about, without giving away his secrets. But I do think there's going to be an incredible market, at least for the next 3 to 5 years.
Well, I fully agree with Alejo. We have been so much entrenched and focused in the development process, and not much thinking about how we're going to operate these projects at the end, how we're going to manage these projects at the end. So that constitutes a real big business opportunity down here in Mexico. As I mentioned in my introduction, I think for this industry, it's more relevant to see how many projects are going to enter into actual commercial operation, not whether are going to be a lot of megawatts in place, or whether a lot of projects are in the development phase. We have to look into what's actually be there, and the market is those projects that are going to be actually in commercial operation. As I mentioned, 30 projects are expected by the end of this year to be in commercial operation, and 60 new projects will be moving into that phase, into commercial operation in 2019 and onwards in the next 10 years. So this constitutes that perhaps in the next 10 years we're going to have around 100 projects as a unit, a facility already working in Mexico. So that's really is an impressive number. I think the party is in Mexico, especially with related to O&M and asset management.
Thank you, Hector. Just to remind everybody that you can ask questions at any moment. You can use the chat box on your right. So yeah, we're speaking about the learning curve. And one question for you is, what are the key operational pains that early markets face, like now Mexico? What will be the main worries for owners at this point?
I think the progression is everybody's now I think really learning about construction, right? Getting those projects off the ground, like we said. And I think on the O&M front, I think what's going to happen is EPCs and project owners and lenders are going to start identifying the different equipment and different technologies and different EPCs and best practices and trying to apply that to the next round of projects. I think that the market's still fairly new, And to me, I don't see any obstacles that are out of the ordinary. I don't see, I mean, financing is always, a critical point in projects. This, again, unsubsidized, super competitive PPAs, it's still a module market that goes up and down in terms of pricing. So I think it is to expect to have some woes in the process, but I think, in my opinion, I'm fairly optimistic that those are going to get resolved. We might see some delays and whatnot, but projects to me are going to get commissioned and be operational. But I think then we're going to start learning more about what technologies are well designed and which ones aren't. So I think there's still a lot to be learned.
Yeah, definitely, Alejo. You're right in mentioning that this is something that we have to face as we progress in the process. I would say the commissioning phase is a very key element into entering operation, but also to set up the right scenario for moving into a more relaxed O&M type of stage. We always, as a developers, as owners of the asset, we have this nice image that once it enters into commercial operation, everything will go smooth and no problema whatsoever. That's not the case. Let me tell you, it hasn't been the case, at least for Gauss. The O&M stage has been very active. It has been complicated. And a lot depends on the type of decisions you make in the development phase. For instance, for us, it has been a very difficult to try to operate and maintain central inverters. That's something that we move forward in Aura 1 and Aura 2 with the central inverters. In Aura 3, another innovation we put together in Aura 3 is that we are using, is going to be the first utility scale in Mexico that is using 100% of string inverters, because our experience in central inverters, at least in a area like La Paz, which is tend to be very dry and big heat, big temperatures, has been not very good whatsoever. So we have decided to move into the string inverters, and we believe that that's going to be a key element to try to minimize O&M cost. Definitely, we see that as a competitive advantage in moving into trying to slash costs, not only in the development phase, but also in the O&M. For instance, I'll give you another example. Aura 1 was built on a 1,000 volts platform, and Aura 3 we decided to move in the 1,500 volts platform. We made that decision because, well, technology is going into that phase, into that type of equipment, but also because we're going to save. We expect to save a lot of problems also in the O&M. We're going to save. We're already saving in wiring and equipment in the construction phase, but we expect that also in the O&M, in the operation phase, we're going to try to minimize maintenance costs using that type of technology and minimizing the wiring of the whole equipment. So those are the type of decisions we have to make in the construction phase, in the development phase, that definitely will impact the cost and the performance of the operation and maintenance services. One thing that we have to be very keen in Mexico, at least, given that again we are a new country that is just giving birth to a new industry like PV, is that the need of certified operators. In order to interact with SENACE, your operators in the facility, the O&M service provider has to bring operators that are certified by SENACE. It's not a difficult task. It's something that that SENACE has put together very well how to certify these operators. But that's something we are looking that maybe a scarce asset around Mexico. You don't see much operators being certified and ready to move into the operational phase right now. So that may be a net bottling issue that can delay some of the entry into operation of the project. So that's something I will say right away, that rather early than later, you have to look into the what type of operators are going to be actually operating the facility.
Interesting particularity, Hector, and yeah, in terms of what is specific to Mexico. So something that you mentioned, of course, that all the decisions that you take beforehand during the construction phase, the components will impact well, the OPEX, the operational costs that you have afterwards. So we're talking about well, key points of accessibility, fault detection, and power outages. This is very important. On this will influence the decisions that you take, and I believe that Alejo also has some clear examples where this applies. And
yeah, and I could not agree more with Hector in this. So once you make the decision on your equipment, you're stuck for 25, 30 years. That's it. There's no going back. I mean, you have some opportunities, you know, when you're doing some repowering to, you know, for example, on the inverter side, we're seeing, you know, folks that are thinking, you know, the long-term, you know, I'm not an expert on inverters, but, you know, they're seeing the long-term, you know, strategy for replacing central inverters with string inverters later on from a, you know, spare part, you know, point of view. But, you know, I could not emphasize that more. And again, back to my initial comment that, you know, folks just think about the cheapest product, and I think there's sometimes a miscommunication or a lack of communication between the project owner, the asset manager, the guy that is looking at the long term, with the EPC, that by nature, and this is not because the EPCs are not good, it's just by nature the EPC is driven by the short term, right? Is the construction period plus the guarantee period, which is usually no more than 2 years. So, you know, they're driven by that. That's the nature of their business. But once you got the equipment, you're stuck with it. And, you know, specifically the tracker, I mean, the way, and I'm biased on this, you know, I mean, I work for a tracker supplier, but, you know, NEXTracker really has looked at the long term and incorporated that into our technology today. So, you know, we see our tracker not just as a structure, but we see it as a smart platform that can, you know, optimize your overall asset management and O&M costs over the life of the plant, and with software, increase plant production. So this is not just the structure where you put your panels on. This is a whole different level of, you know, plant operations and plant optimization that, you know, most, you know, folks that are driven by the short term are not even thinking about, but it's critical, you know, whether they decide to go with NEXTracker or another provider, it is critical for project owners to think about this. And again, you know, Hector mentioned, you know, string inverters, and we're seeing a bit of a trend in string inverters, and NEXTracker is by nature a decentralized technology. And, you know, we're seeing it, you know, that folks sometimes are concerned about, you know, whether you have, you know, I don't know, 50 or 80 motors where, you know, a multi-row single axis tracker can have just one motor. And it's like, yeah, that's fine. But, you know, there's design that we do for redundancy and resiliency. You know, each one of those rows that we have is about 30 kilowatts. You know, the components are tested for long-term reliability, each one of them. But in the event that, you know, one of them breaks, or if a string inverter breaks, probably you have, you know, your downtime is going to be driven by 30 kilowatts or 60 kilowatts instead of an inverter. It's not going to be driven by, you know, 3 megawatts or 5 megawatts in case of a central inverter, or 700, 800 kilowatt instead of a centralized tracker structure. So, you have these decisions that really are going to impact your plant reliability and operational cost in the long term. Wiring, the use of fasteners. We do not use nuts and bolts, and that helps fast construction, but also you don't need to come back and retorque those. So that's the critical O&M aspect that is already built into our technology. And we'll talk in a moment about weather and wind design, but as another critical element that can really impair your ability to produce for long term or really destroy your project. So it's really important to address those issues at the project design stage and at the technology selection stage. And then you cannot forego for one for the other, but developers, project owners, asset managers should not overlook the impacts that the different technology choices have over the long term.
I couldn't agree more than what you're saying, Alejo. The word here, I mean, the key concept here is decentralization. It's very important to introduce that feature in your facility, whether we're talking about inverters, whether we're talking about trackers. It's very important to try to avoid that something happened to one row or one panel, that is aligned to the whole structure, and 5 megawatts go off because one panel was disaligned. That's a major issue. So it's very important to have this decentralized equipment in order to really minimize the OPEX cost. We have had events where the whole central investor goes away because a failure in a filter, a small piece within the inverters go off, and we lost 2-3 megawatts of power, and we have to wait till the technician comes to the site and review and change, because if we touch it, we lose the guarantee. So that's a major problem with the string inverters. We just change a couple of people change the inverters, and you throw it away. I mean, it's garbage. Basically, it's not being repaired, the old one, and we have it in storage, the new string inverter. So it's very easy to maintain, and most important is we guarantee that the facility is up and running at 100%. Perhaps another issue that we have to stress is the soiling problem, and here I don't see, unfortunately, perhaps there's not in the whole world, but certainly in Mexico, we don't see a good solution on how to avoid soiling. I mean, it has been more artisan type of address soiling than a technological solution, either using automatic solutions or more labor-intensive solution. We don't see that very good set in the industry, at least so far. And this is a little contradictory, because soiling and cleaning is I would say it is the most expensive item we have in the OPEX budget. So it's a little contradictory that we have this big item in terms of cost, but we don't have a standardized and optimal solution to address soiling.
So just to complement on what Hector said, a decentralized technology. So once you make sure that your manufacturer has addressed the reliability issues, and we together with the tracker, we provide a spare part strategy. So we do supply spare parts early on with the tracker to address this very point. Now you're faced with a motor went down for some reason, and then you have X amount of motors in spare that are already included in the project quote, and it'll take you 2 minutes to change that, replace it, and then you have the warranty to cover for it. but you can just replace it very quickly, and you don't need to be waiting, like Hector said, for the technicians to arrive. I mean, that is downtime. There's money you're leaving on the table, and probably penalties you're getting exposed to that. The next level, and this is to me the beauty of decentralized structure. That's one aspect. It's fairly, the risk mitigation. The second one is the granularity that it gives you in terms of information and control. So you have now information, for a string inverter at a string level, and for a tracker, you have it, at a level, for example, for us, a 1500 volt, 3 strings, at the mechanical level. So you can get all the way to that point to narrow down a problem. And problem, like Hector says, problems happen all the time. It's one thing or it's the other thing. It will happen. So if you have a platform that allows you or sends you, automatic alarms, because our trackers are, require connectivity, but they're like constantly being monitored and send alarms to the asset managers. And I'll tell you, you're having this issue in this tracker that is abnormal. Go check it, and you can turn, what could have been, a failure in weeks, days, months. You can predict that, replace it, in your normal, preventive O&M runs, and avoid that breaking. So we've done that with, tons of our clients. So you get all that information, and then, when it comes to real innovation, like THRU Capture, the software we have, you can only do that with independent road tracking. So there's all this gamut of things, from basic power plant reliability to predictive analytics to yield increase that you can only do with a certain kind of technology. So it is absolutely critical. And in regards to what Hector says, absolutely. I mean, soiling and cleaning are critical items. And I think particularly where Hector projects are located, we have about 1 gigawatt projects operating in India, where the weather is also is very humid, and there's a lot of dust. And I think that is similar in the Baja region, right? And folks think that it's just dry and that won't be a problem, but then it is a problem, and you have to clean very often. That's, like Hector says, the most significant expense in the O&M of a project. And then, so what we do is mostly collaboration with, suppliers of cleaning technology, and we can adapt, our products, to some of them to make it easier for those suppliers to, help folks like, Hector, with, cleaning services, for our platform. So there's a lot of levels of, things that, technology suppliers can do to be proactive to mitigate some of these, O&M issues.
Alejo, so actually we have on screen a few reasons so why the let's say the centralized solutions also help to mitigate risks. And also speaking about soiling, and there is also a question from the audience related to that. How are asset owners and investors looking at automation and software to reduce and to meet this risk, and to let's say make a transition between a reactive maintenance and a preventive maintenance? So we're talking here about data, and Hector, what is your point of view here related to this question?
Yeah, no, that's a very pertinent question. Again, this is an issue that is more relies on the asset management and the owners, because you can lose 2-3% of production if you don't have a good strategy on soiling. So that's a lot of money to keep losing just because that. So the O&M, I haven't seen the O&M very worried about soiling. I mean, they charge anyway, and they deduct the soiling from whatever performance indicator they have. So this is a question that we as project managers has to be more aware and try to remediate from one way to the other. My concern here is that we haven't seen, and I think this is a big business opportunity for perhaps some audience, that we don't have a standardized or some good solution on how to address the soiling. Perhaps because the soiling issue is quite different from one project to the other, so you don't really have an homogeneous solution. But we have been looking into different solutions, and so far has been very poor the type of management we have of soiling, other than hiring a bunch of labor and do the cleaning by hand, basically. No, we would like to see other alternatives, especially with a little more technology. I think it's tend to be expensive, but in the long run, I think it's paid by itself. No, we have to do the economics, but unfortunately, we don't have too many options right now in the Mexican market.
So just to add to that, more on the general, not necessarily on the soiling point, but on more proactive O&M in general, and I think this is again back to technology selection. You can be quote unquote stuck with a technology that it will provide you very aggregated data on your power plant, or you can go with a decentralized structure both on the inverter and the tracker side, or either of those, and give you minute by minute, tracker by tracker information that for example we can provide our clients with what is the current, what is the voltage of each motor on the power plant, what is the status of each one of those trackers at any point in time, and send alarms to our client if we think something is not working as it should be, so they can see if it's a vegetation, is an obstruction in the tracker that is creating that issue, or maybe is a component that can fail at some point. So we're not seeing it as much yet on the Mexican market, but we're seeing a fair amount of our clients here that are already thinking ahead, especially the IPPs that come from the combined cycle power plants that are heavy on maintenance, or the wind side. Those guys are really thinking about O&M. The more newer, just solar guys, probably not as much. U.S. market, very different, more sophisticated, more mature. So O&M is a critical point in the decision-making process for tracker selection. So, to me, it's absolutely critical, especially now, to have that information and turn it into, actionable strategies, to reduce O&M cost.
Yeah, and again, I think that's that's a key point again in terms of this decentralized solutions that they really will make for asset owners and for asset managers to make a better understanding on where the problem lies. So also another key point that we have to put on the table, because this is of course something particular to the region as well. So how to deal with severe weather conditions, and Mexico is still on the Caribbean belt, and how to deal after a phenomenon, a disaster, how to get back on track, what does insurance cover in terms of components, downtime period of plants. I believe that you have some experience that you can share.
Thank you, Marcel. Yeah, indeed, we have some experience in that. I mean, you have to take into account, you have to understand that Mexico is in between of hurricane season. From the Pacific, from the Atlantic, from the Caribbean, we have hurricanes. We're in the hurricane zone, and we have to recognize that. Just in the last year in the Pacific, we had more than 25 hurricanes passing by Mexico, or actually hitting Mexico. I don't remember the figure in the Gulf of Mexico or the Caribbean, but it's something around that number. So you have to realize that's a fact, and that's where we are, and you have to plan accordingly. So it's very important that in your selection of trackers or fixed structure, you have to understand very well which way you have to go. In Aura Uno, we make the mistake to not take this into consideration. So we installed in Aura Uno Original, we installed trackers, very certainly not NEXTracker. We missed that that part, but it was a very fragile tracker back in those days, 2012. Very fragile. That it was promised that it will support any wind conditions whatsoever, but in fact it didn't. So we move into we have to change the whole facility into the fixed structure, and we couldn't afford to have another mistake. So we decided to go with fixed structure, and we have stick to that decision for Aura 3 also. So recognizing that La Paz, Baja Sur, is located in a place where hurricanes are going to hit eventually. So that's something to have in consideration. Also, if you locate your project along the Pacific rim, then you're going to have that risk. If you're in the middle of the country, in the Bajío region, for instance, or in Chihuahua, the likelihood to have an hurricane is zero, no? So don't worry about that. But do worry, especially in the Bajío, do worry about flooding. Right, a few weeks ago, I was surprised because a big factory, manufacturing factory in El Bajío was flooded completely. And I believe that there was a big hit in production because the cars that were parking there, they were affected. So difficult to imagine, but it rains a lot, and you have to be very careful whether your site selection do consider how to deal with floodings and not regular flooding. I mean, this may be once in a life flooding, but that could be a big an important hit.
But it happens, right? I mean, I appreciate Hector bringing this up, and I think it shows the extent of Gauss' knowledge that that they switched technologies after that incident. I absolutely respect that, and I think they made the right decision for that location. I mean, we see I mean, this is such a critical item. We see independent engineers and lenders and developers pay extreme attention to other items of the project design that are important, but nobody to really discuss wind. And just to add to what Hector says, I mean, definitely on the hurricane prone areas, you really need to look at that. But we're seeing tracker have wind failure events below hurricane regions. Just to add to that, so NEXTracker is one of the very few tracker companies that does and designs based on wind tunnel, not necessarily just on local code. So we meet the local code, but our design is based on wind tunnel testing. We are the only tracker in the industry that has dampers. And dampers, what they do is to limit the ability of wind to have a negative impact on the structure. We stow a different angle than most trackers because we understand what are the possible impacts. Some of those videos that you're seeing circulated on LinkedIn, from different suppliers, those are things that can happen anywhere in Mexico at any point in time, and you're seeing trackers that are not damped. Ours is. So, to me, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of proper wind design, for the power plant, because when it happens, it's gone. It will break your modules, it will break your structure. Talk about downtime there. So it's a major item, to consider in the power plant design.
Alejo, we're just running a little bit out of time here, so let's just take on a few more questions from the audience. There is here somebody very interested in knowing what are the key differences in terms of O&M. Well, comparing utility scale to distributed generation. Is a totally different game?
Completely different. I don't think there is a O&M per se operator in the distribution front. Normally, the guy who installed do the asset management and O&M, and it's fully integrated services. In the utility scale, you have this very well defined roles of who is the developer, who is the asset manager, who is the project manager, who is the O&M. I mean, you have these different roles that tend to be, some are integrated, some of those are not. So you have to understand that very, very important roles along the project development value added.
Yeah, so it's a totally different game indeed. And there is another question also here on the technology. How is expected development, and what will be the importance of energy storage in Mexico?
Well, that's a very timely question also. I mean, storage is coming very, very strong into Mexico, just because the transmission situation in Mexico is very poor. Interconnection and the transmission is very poor. So if in other countries renewable energy can penetrate fully in a more free scale, in Mexico is going to be restricted by transmission constraints and congestion and lack of interconnection. So Mexico, I think, is poised to be one important player in the world of storage, and not only storage in the utility scale, but also in the commercial and industrial and even residential level. So keep tuned, because we're going to see a lot of storage coming on forthcoming.
Just to add to Hector's comments, I completely agree. I think folks are looking at the overall number of PV penetration into the grid, but I think you have to go a little bit more granular to understand some parts of the grid is going to get saturated way before the whole system does, and we're seeing a lot of build out in Sonora, in Aguascalientes, in areas like that. So I think we need to look at it more on the regional level. Right now there's only regulation that is sort of adverse to the project, because it's just voltage control and frequency control. That is not a way that the project can monetize on the storage. I think we need more regulation that allows the developer to monetize the storage benefits, right? Like load shifting or peak shifting, or different things that need to be done in order to allow for more efficient grid operation. So I think there's a lot that the regulatory commission and that system operator need to do together with the industry, to find ways to promote storage where it's needed.
Alejo, and another question for you is in terms of when comparing projects that include trackers against ones that don't use these technologies, what are the difference when looking at the share of CapEx versus OpEx costs?
So I mean, definitely fixed structure, has a just in the tracker only probably cost about half of what a tracker costs installed. Probably about a 10% difference in your EPC. O&M, I don't have numbers off the top of my head, but it will be fairly similar to O&M, because the trackers are fairly maintenance free, and you still need to do the cleaning and the vegetation control that you need to do for any other power plant. So in the O&M, probably you're not saving much. What you need to think about, which is critical, is the production boost that you get with a single axis tracker versus a fixed structure. So overall, the industry has proven over the past few years that trackers are the way to go, except that you're in an area like Hector mentions, that weather is severe, probably makes it more sense to have a fixed structure there for that purpose, or you have a very difficult site, or you have very land constraint. I mean, there might be some situations where fixed structures do make sense, but if you're talking about a fairly flat desert type utility scale power plant, definitely trackers are the way to go.
Let's get on another question before we round off. So here in this personal experience, 80% of the problems in the O&M period are in the commissioning phase, either by missing owner specifications or improper handover. Do you agree with such a high value of percentage, and how key is commissioning to a healthy long-term operation?
Well, I would say this is very, very key, Marcel. is very important, especially in your interaction with the authorities, especially with SENACE and CFE. They are very keen and very sensitive. So how you enter into the commissioning phase and how you put together the testing of your facility that is according with the commissioning phase. So I would say that your concern will be how to satisfy all the requirements and the technical specifications that are demanded by SENACE and CFE to interconnect. That's key. If you don't pay attention, you're going to be delayed 1 month, 2 months to actually enter into COD. So, other than looking into issues with the facility, the important thing is to enter rapidly into commissioning and comply with all the specifications by interconnection and start operating. After that, after COD, you can adjust whatever is needed, but at least you're already charging, and that's the important thing at that point in time.
Just quickly to add to that on the tracker side, I don't have the specific numbers in terms of issues, but I do agree that it's absolutely critical. For us, we have folks involved, through the construction, doing mostly quality assurance. So we are supporting the installer of the tracker to make sure that they're doing it correctly. So when it comes to time of commissioning, there's no issues, or issues have been addressed. So the commissioning for us is also a quality check, and also getting the plan up and running. And here's another benefit of decentralized structure: is you can commission as you go. Once the road is complete, if your inverter is done, you can start selling energy. You don't need to wait until you have blocks and blocks completed. So could not agree more that commissioning is good, but also being engaged through the process until the handover is also very critical, so your commissioning goes smooth.
Perfect. And gentlemen, thank you very much for this hour, for these insights. And yeah, we have a lot of engagement here in the audience. We have still some questions. I will forward them to you. I wouldn't like these questions to be unanswered. So thank you, everybody, all that were listening to us for these hours. Thank you for your active participation. It's a pleasure to be discussing these topics with these gentlemen that have decades of experience in the market in Mexico. And yeah, we will discuss these topics and many more in our upcoming conference in solar asset management in Mexico and Central America. It's on 8 and 10 October. So hope to see you there, or there in Mexico City, or also now other of our upcoming events, and particularly our solar asset management conference is in Europe just 2 weeks afterwards, 23 and 24 October. So maybe we meet then in Milan. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Hector. Thank you, Alejo, and wishing you a good day.
Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Goodbye. Thank you.